Welcome to the nurseMARK podcast. This is your host, nurseMARK. We cover all things health, happiness, cannabis. I've done a lot of things in my life. Joined the Marines when I was 17, welcomed my first baby at 22, started my own business at 25. I've been a certified yoga instructor, a Eucharistic minister. I've even sang with a symphony orchestra and was recorded at one of the top 10 venues in the world. I finished nursing school while running a multi-million-dollar business, and most recently became a level 1 certified CrossFit coach and cannabis nurse. You get the idea. So why nurseMARK? Why health, happiness, cannabis? Because I have a little secret not too many people know about. I've battled lifelong depression and mood swings. I actively sought out various ways to deal with my issues because, you see, my depression isn't effectively treated with medication. I had to find alternative ways to deal with it, and I worked hard to get where I am. Where I am is living the most amazing life with no depression. I'm here to share my experiences, to explore in depth the tools like exercise, mindfulness, nutrition, and cannabis. We'll explore what it means to create a life you may only dream of today. That's why I'm here. I want you to have what I have. So sit back and enjoy. I promise you won't be disappointed. Please welcome today's guest, Megan Bruneau. Megan, welcome to the nurseMARK podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you could be here. Hey, tell us a little about yourself. What's your background?
I am trained as a therapist, so I have a master's in counseling psychology and have been doing that for about a decade. However, I am licensed in British Columbia, so anywhere outside of there, I see people as a coach or see clients as a coach, and I just essentially help people get to really know themselves super well and understand where they might be holding themselves back from success and joy. I do a lot of executive coaching, so work with a lot of entrepreneurs and C-level folks and people who recognize where maybe their first kind of insight into their psychological hurdles is something at work or something that's holding them back from reaching a goal. Mm-hmm. So that's my kind of one-on-one stuff. And then I also have a podcast and I speak and I write. Have a lot of articles out there. I do stuff on Instagram and, I'm now starting to do some workshops and more sort of like organizational stuff. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Nice. And so which do you like best? Do you like the one-on-one counseling? Do you like the workshop stuff, or you just like love it all?
It all serves different purposes. I mean, I don't think I'll ever stop seeing clients one-on-one. I mean, that's really like, it's my inspiration, it's my research, it's my meaning, it's my perspective. It's super powerful for me. And I do truly love that. But, I love writing. Like I love creating. I love creating content and learning and interviewing people and stuff. So no, I don't think there's one favorite. It all supports each other.
Yeah. I'm the same way. Love it. It's that diversity. It really is. It's empowering and energizing. So today, I thought we'd talk about resilience and emotional intelligence. And those are just two topics that, when I looked through your stuff and read your some of the stuff that you put out there for content, that kind of really resonated with me because there's a lot of talk in business around resilience and something that's near and dear to my heart. Relationships is always that context of emotional intelligence, and so those kind of seem to really reach out to me. So I thought we'd talk about that today.
Sure, that sounds great.
So why don't we start with resilience? I mean, what's even the concept of resilience?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's like a APA, American Psychological Association definition of resilience and whatnot, which I could probably find and read. But really, like the way I define resilience, and I think most people understand it, is just like bouncing back. Really, like the ability to come back from adversity or hardship or challenges and be able to kind of be I want to be like, be resilient too. You're like, that's not helpful.
Resilient.
Just be able to bounce back from them, be able to, manage, handle, integrate, respond to these difficult challenges and still continue to live one's life. And oftentimes be able to find meaning in those experiences or be able to kind of integrate them in a way to your life story in which you're not ruminating over them. And it's not, 10 or 20 years later and you're still thinking back to that thing that happened in seventh grade or whatever. So, I guess if I were to put a definition,
it would talk about that for a minute. I had something happen in seventh grade, Megan, and but it's true. That I know that personally. You'll ruminate about stuff that happened like years and years ago, and it sucks up your energy and time now.
Totally.
So,
and I think, one more thing I'll say too. I think another important piece, and again, this is kind of just going off like what I perceive as resilience in my clients and just in general is, so I don't love the word like when people are like, oh, don't be a victim. Like, I think that can be very, judgmental and pathologizing. And like, oftentimes, like we do need to be a victim if that's like what feels right for us. And, that's the word that we want to embody. And, there's this whole move toward like, I'm a survivor, I'm a thriver, I'm a this, I'm a that. And like, that can work for some people. Right. And then for others, it's like, I need to, for now, be a victim. Right. But I guess another piece of resilience that I see is ultimately being able to kind of take responsibility and have this more like active role in one's like recovery and kind of recognize like, okay, whatever happened, whatever life circumstances I've been through, rather than sort of sitting there being like, why was I dealt such a bad hand? Why is life so hard? Why me kind of thing? It's more, okay, these are the cards that I've been dealt, and how am I going to, play my best hand, or whatever the cliche is.
Yeah, it's totally a different perspective. And it really is you taking control of the situation, with the right tools and be able to work through these things. And I can think of examples within my circle of friends and family over the years that, it'd be a similar circumstance for two different people, but they reacted totally differently. And one person would be like, well, it happened. Okay, I'm going to move on from here. And they literally move on and don't think about it anymore. And then the other person will be like 10 years later, they'll be like, oh, remember when that really bad thing happened to me? I haven't been the same since.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, two similar experiences, but two totally different outcomes. So, So when you look at those two people, so what's one doing differently that the other one's not doing? I mean, how does somebody get into a track of, oh, this thing happened to me and now I'm just going to spiral and I'm going to own this thing. It's going to own me for the next 10 years, as opposed to, well, I'm going to own it and just move away from it.
Right. I mean, I think it's multifaceted. I mean, yes, it's kind of like a nature and nurture thing. I mean, there is some research to suggest that there are like, biological, neurological, genetic implications that lead to resilience. And obviously, like, those aren't necessarily the ones that I'm intervening at or that I'm helping clients with and whatnot. But I think, first thing that comes to mind for me is really like one's worldview or one's life philosophy. And I think, I speak about this a lot. I work from a more like spiritual, sort of Buddhism informed paradigm. And we're fed these stories in the media that our lives are supposed to look a certain way, right? Like whether it's, now it's social media for the most part. It's Instagram, I don't know, Pinterest, because the recent one that someone was talking about.
It's crazy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So these social media platforms, but then even, of course, like rom-coms, and we grow up with fairy tales and Disney movies. And even, I was just at a thing yesterday and they were talking a lot about video games and games being a main source of media for people. And there's a narrative in that as well. I'm going to sneeze 1 sec.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Okay. Sorry.
No, come on, it's coming.
Yeah, I know it's always when you're like, I'm going to sneeze and then it stops.
It's organic.
So, we have this idea of what life is supposed to look like. Right. And
we create that worldview, whatever we're fed, right? We create the narrative for our own story.
Right, of course. And, depending on certain faiths and practices and whatnot, certain people believe that if you do these things, then your life will go this way. And whereas with Buddhism, it's more, the first noble truth is that, life is suffering, or there's pain in life. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think for people who are more resilient to some of these hardships or adversities, the first thing I would say is just even recognizing that hardship and adversity is part of life. It doesn't mean that you're not like manifesting enough. It doesn't mean that you're not thinking positively. It doesn't mean that you said something and then you didn't cancel it to the universe or whatever. Like, I'm sorry, all that bullshit drives me fucking crazy. Like, it's like, like,
Oh, come on.
like, no, it's, you're allowed to say something out loud and it's not going to make it happen. I mean, look, I should be mindful because for some people that does give them a sense of control and it helps them manage their anxiety and it feels empowering. However, it's also like we need to be able to talk about things that are anxiety provoking for us.
Yeah, I think it's like a superstition. If you start to believe in that, you're like, oh, I better not say that or it's going to manifest.
Exactly, right. And then it's like, and then how are you going to work through the anxiety around this thing? You're just going to suffer in silence.
And it probably I don't really want to have manifest, but sounded good at the time. So I'm hoping they don't come true, right?
Right, exactly. No, yeah, exactly. I mean, whatever, don't wash your clothes for, I don't know, like whatever doesn't, manages your superstition. But I think that, in my opinion, a lot of that just does come out of this desire for control. And the more, again, spiritual perspective is it's not about finding control. It's about surrendering to the fact that we don't have control and responding to our daily circumstances or momentary circumstances and kind of just like responding to life. Because, of course we can have a certain level of influence, perhaps, if, you do believe in free will, which I don't. But at the end of the day, like, it's really more about how you perceive your situation. And so I think for the first piece is, those who are more resilient, like they just, rather than ruminating and being like, why did this thing happen to me? It's okay. It's not saying, bad things happen and whatever, I'm just supposed to like move on. No, I mean, there's a certain tragedies happen for people and we have to like grieve and take time and seek help and process. And our lives are never the same. I mean, it's not about healing a lot of the time. It's about adjusting and just being like, okay, I'm not the same person I was before X event happened.
Right.
However,
if someone close to you passes away, like, a parent or a sibling or something like that. I mean, you're changed. You're fundamentally changed at that moment.
Absolutely.
They're not in your life, right? So
exactly. And so but it's not about saying, why did this happen to me? What have I done wrong that made this happen to me? Why have I? It's like, no, I mean, this is what it is to be a human on this earth, right?
How it is. It's the experience.
Right. So that's the like a big piece that I would say. And then in terms of other more like practical things, like beyond mindset, social connection is huge. So like really, most studies have shown that in response to like traumatic events or difficult things or depression or, any kind of like mental health stuff, it's really about connection for both like prevention and intervention or, prevention of more extreme forms of like mental illness and whatnot. And then also, healing, being able, we shouldn't be grieving in isolation. We shouldn't be managing our difficult emotions in isolation. I mean, there's obviously complexities in that because for some people it can cause shame, but
people hold back though. I mean, they don't want to talk about when they're feeling badly or when, they feel like, at least in my experience, people are hesitant to really share how they're feeling. Like you just go through life saying, hey, Megan, how are you? How you been? Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. Well, that's not how, that's not how we have our conversations. We dive right in and it's like, oh yeah, no, shitty right now. Thank you. No, but hey,
I mean, look,
we're going to go through.
Totally. And look, like I was just reflecting on this the other day, so it's top of mind. But I mean, I remember very well, like when I was younger, my parents went through a pretty rough divorce and my mom was very affected, understandably so. And I remember for years afterwards, like whenever we'd run into someone in like the grocery store or like it just anywhere, so I'd be like, oh, how are you doing? And she'd be like, oh, terrible. And like she would just be like, oh, I'm doing so bad. And I remember her being like, Mom, like, can't you just say you're doing well? Like stop telling people you're not doing well. Like, just say, I'm doing great. How are you? People don't actually want to hear that you're not doing well. Right. And I remember that so vividly. And, of course, like I was like 8 or 10 or something like that. Right. And, I had learned, okay, well, when someone asks you how you're doing, you say, I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you? Mm-hmm. And to be honest, like a lot of the times when people are sort of, I'm great. I'm doing really, really well. I'm like, okay, like, I mean, a lot of times like that is true, but for me, I feel deeply more connected to somebody when they're like, I'm some things are good and some things are challenging. And, here's this sort of, if they want to get into it. So I think that we're taught to just pretend that we're fine all the time, or we're great. We don't want to like bother people with our problems. And it's not like by saying, oh, it's not like when you asked me how I was doing this morning, I was like, oh, I'm doing terribly. And here's this is happening. And here's that. And like,
no, we're going to talk about that. Just like,
Yeah, I was like, look, like my work is going really well. My life is in fucking shambles otherwise. Like, might get kicked out of the US in a week. Who knows?
I mean, I'm thinking that all of my friends now, when they ask me the question, how you doing, that they already know that they got to have like 10 or 15 minutes to really like have a chat, because it's going to happen. I'm going to tell them to say, okay, what's going on? But you know what? I really think that, whatever the circumstances.
Part of that too, like I'm getting a bit tangential here, but like, I also think that we need to normalize that life is not like, you don't have to be happy all the time. And this is something I feel really strongly about. And so in some ways, when I tell people how I'm like really doing, which is usually some things are great, some things are not, overall, like I'm good, it's just, again, it's coming from that Buddhist framework of like, like there's pain. There are some things that aren't good. And then, but like overall, I am good because I've learned how to be with my discomfort, and I've learned how to recognize like, this is life. There are some hard things for sure.
So
and
you think that goes to sort of the root of resilience, is being able to be present with the discomfort in life as opposed to just 100%. Like letting it overwhelm you?
100%. That's like, that's exactly really like what it's all about. I mean, what I help people do, because so perfectionism, which is sort of what I specialize in, perfectionism is sort of this way of orchestrating our lives so that we don't have to be with emotional discomfort. So it comes out of shame, basically chronic shame, and this belief that we're bad and we're broken. And it's this idea that like, okay, I don't know how to be with my emotional discomfort. So if I, do everything perfectly and I, look perfect and I act perfect and et cetera, then no one can hurt me. Then I won't feel pain. And it's this sort of like, it's a coping strategy, and it's an exhausting one. And it actually causes a lot of anxiety and depression and eating disorders and all sorts of things, relationship problems, the list goes on. But so it's this one way, it's a very sort of fragile way, very fragile, overwhelming, stressful, exhausting way of trying to avoid emotional discomfort. Whereas what I try to help people do is, instead of avoiding it, we learn how, as Rumi says, the cure for the pain is in the pain. We learn how to go into it. And resilience is about, rather than, orchestrating your life in this way where it's quite small and you're not doing anything that's out of your comfort zone or that could potentially cause anxiety, rejection, sadness, hurt, heartbreak, disappointment, shame, guilt, loneliness, anger, etc. It's about being able to do those things and trust that, look, there is a risk that I might feel an uncomfortable emotion in response to whatever happens here. And that emotion is impermanent, it will pass. And my inner voice, which perhaps used to be critical, is now shifting to one that's more compassionate and understanding of the fact that I'm a human who makes mistakes, and what are my resources that I can go to? And, how can I integrate this into my life story and recognize that like something good or a lesson will come of it, and that we're all just students of life kind of thing.
And that's the path that leads to resilience, that leads to this ability to kind of experience and then not attach to it and say, okay, I'm moving on from that.
Totally.
Like now, my struggle right now is in confrontation. So I've lived my whole life trying not to be in confrontation, because I learned at an early age, confrontation, you're going to lose, you're going to feel bad. So avoid it at all costs.
Totally.
So, you become this person who avoids confrontation and does things, lives a life, not really the one that I want to be in. Right. Although mine's fantastic and wonderful. There's so much more available. And I'm in that pain, that feeling of being in confrontation in different situations in my life, and I'm not backing down from it. And it is uncomfortable.
Totally.
It's like it brings all of this whole stuff that's been there in the background all this time. It's like, okay, where that was and this was. And
well, of course. And look, if your experience of confrontation growing up, and I don't know anything, about that, and I'm just going to rattle off like examples, but if your experience of confrontation growing up was like witnessing your parents yelling at each other, and, you as a child were terrified of this, or, a parent getting mad at you, or a bully, beating you up on the schoolyard or whatever, like if your past experience of confrontation, if in it you learned the way to protect yourself is to avoid and to not say anything, then of course you're going to carry that with you, and you're going to have like a somatic or a bodily response to whatever comes.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Instead of making it back, it's like, boom. It's
exactly.
Immediate.
And it's interesting. Someone just asked me yesterday, I do these like Q&As on Instagram or these Ask Me Anythings. And someone just asked me like, oh, how would you revamp the education system if you, wanted to help people be more resilient to psychological hurdles. And that was one of the things I said, was like, we need to learn how to have difficult conversations, not just, and like, I guess at what point does a difficult conversation become confrontation? I mean, what means confrontation for you? Or what does that mean? But I think either way, like learning how to kind of be with the discomfort and be like, this is a hard thing.
Perfect example. Right now, I'm getting ready to launch a new business, and I've taken on a new partner. It's a person that I met at a landmark education thing like 10 years ago, and we're best friends. And she is a powerhouse rock star. And so we're having this discussion about how to split equity and responsibilities and roles. And like it's become this confrontation with a person that I love and respect and like admire, but it's bringing in all of these past conversations of like, oh, well, okay, now, do I trust? Do I not trust? And it's ridiculous. Like I had the awareness today. I'm like, no, I can let go of all that stuff. That's the old conversation. Now we're creating this new awesome thing. We don't need to have that in the way. But it's still.
Yeah, well, totally. And be gentle with yourself around the stuff coming up, because look, like I'm not a huge fan of this whole like, oh, that's in the past. That's a story. Just like, it's like, okay, yes. Like that's like, it's good to be able to tell yourself that. And also like your body has the different experience. So our minds and our bodies, I mean, it gets stored and it gets stored. I think it's just, it gets stored at a cellular level. So that's there, that experience. Right. Exactly.
Why I get that hack. That's why I get that cortisol rush, the amygdala response, all of the things that happen.
Totally. Exactly. And so, just trusting that like that is a process to go through. And, yes, our mind is not just our brain, it's our body as well. It's like a whole experience here. And, it takes a lot of practice to rewire those pathways and have a different experience and learn how to, feel empowered. And that's why, a lot of the work that I do with clients is somatically focused. And it is about noticing, okay, what is the experience in your body when you say, wait, I think I actually deserve, X amount of equity, or no, I'm going to stand in my power here. And I'm going to decide that like, no, this is not an area where I'm going to be flexible, or, here's the sort of hard line for me, or I want to understand, I want to be fair. And, it seems like, what if we were to do it this way? And not backing down and sort of just being like, okay, no, whatever you want. No, it's fine. I don't want to argue over it.
That's the fine line, because confrontation for me was always to avoid it. So I'd give up. I'd say, oh, yes, absolutely. Let's just do it your way and I'll just go over here. But what that ends up being is dysfunctional. And in the end, you walk away because I didn't have a voice. I didn't say right. Or they didn't need to say what they wanted.
Yeah. And that's a huge part of boundary setting. And, I have a lot of that in my own life. I've always been like placating and people pleasing. And, there's certain relationships in my life that, especially over the last couple of years, I've decided to change the way that I act and decided to put myself first. And it's been very uncomfortable and very heartbreaking in many ways. And I've lost, important relationships to me. But, if the choice for me, I've decided was like, either a relationship in which I feel respected and heard and valued and whatnot, versus a relationship in which I'm perpetuating certain patterns that ultimately, talking about relationships,
get me into relationship that you said, you lost, that you valued. It was only in the context of you being a certain person, which was not you with a voice, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't an emotionally safe relationship for me. Right. So, or they weren't emotionally safe relationships. And so, that may change in the future, who knows? But for now, the act of self-respect for myself is to be able to set those boundaries. So I would say for you, I mean, it sounds like you're in pretty deep with this and you'll find a way to make it work. But also like for any entrepreneur, anyone starting out a business, like it's very important that you and your co-founder feel heard, respected. Yes, there are boundaries, but there's also a lot of compassion there, and that you feel like there's flexibility, because I would say that as a red flag otherwise.
Yeah. I know if there's a firm line that you say, oh no, definitely not going to do anything other than that. Yeah, there's a problem there. Yeah, there's a problem. So we have this relationship where we're really open and honest about all of it. And we communicate all these things, even communicating the uncomfortability and actually talking about what you talked about earlier. How's it feeling right now? What's going on in my body? And so, what response am I having in this confrontation? So it's really cool. And actually it'll be part of our programming when we move out into the world with the organization, try to help people. We'll share, our experience of this right now and how what we did to kind of get around it or get through it, more like get through it.
Yeah.
So you started talking about relationships. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a shit show for me at some time.
Me too.
So emotional intelligence plays a big role in relationship, in all relationships, right?
Totally.
So why don't we talk about emotional intelligence a bit? And this really is near and dear to my heart because I do struggle a lot in relationship, but I have a lot of fun, and I have known a lot of great people and a lot of great people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, and look, like you and me both, I mean, I think we're in an interesting time culturally when it comes to relationships. And obviously, like, technology has completely transformed how we date. And oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts on this. We could do hours and hours talking about
we could do hours and hours.
Why,
we should probably do a podcast just on online dating because
I've actually thought about it.
we'll do it. We'll do another
like Hinge or something.
We'll definitely do another episode on just on online dating. You
Exactly.
and I have some amazing insight on online dating.
Totally. So, I mean, look, like emotional intelligence, again, one of these concepts that I'm probably not going to define it in the way that the internet does. Or Daniel Goleman, who coined the term.
Show, right? This is I want to know what your definition is.
Right. Totally.
But anybody else? This is about you.
I mean, I think like emotional intelligence in my experience and what I see in clients is really awareness of one's internal experience, and not only awareness of it, but the ability to respond to it mindfully. So what that means is like, look, like as humans, we are emotional beings. Our emotions are what have kept us alive for hundreds of thousands of years. And unfortunately, today we live in a society that's very pathologizing of emotions. And what I mean by that is we're told not to be sad and to just be positive. And, loneliness, is worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And, if you're anxious or if you have anxiety, then you have anxiety and you have a mental illness and you should be, taking a pill. And sometimes medication, of course, like is absolutely like the best solution a solution in like a, context of various different forms of treatment or response to whatever it is that you're dealing with. But for the most part, our emotions are difficult or uncomfortable emotions are there to tell us something. They're meant to be paid attention to. And, we oftentimes don't differentiate between like an emotion and a reaction to an emotion. So a good example is something like anger. People are always like, anger is bad. There's nothing good about anger. And actually, no, anger is very important. And anger tells you that you've been mistreated, that a boundary's been crossed. You need to advocate for yourself or someone else, or an injustice has occurred. And so it's a signal, right? Like if we didn't have anger, we wouldn't walk away from these relationships where we're treated or mistreated, I should say.
Funny, just as an aside, I was talking to my aunt last night, and she's grew up in France and came here like in the mid '60s. And, we're talking about anger and about how, she would, just yell and scream and get it out. And then, 5 minutes later, go to bed and everything's fine. It's like, that's just how we as French people, like, just do it. Like, we just get angry and then we're done with it and we move on. Yeah. I'm like, well, and then I shared my thing about confrontation. I'm like, well, that's definitely not what I do.
Right.
Like, if I get angry and we get into a fight, it lingers for days because I'm going to think about, okay, what happened here?
Yeah.
Right. It's funny.
Yeah. And I would say like neither of those is probably an optimal way of responding to anger, right? Like yelling and screaming. It's one thing if, you're by yourself and it's not escalating the anger, but if you're causing, that's a form of violence, right? Yelling and screaming. Yeah. And or internalizing or repressing or suppressing is turning it inward to yourself. Is oftentimes people say depression is internalized anger or anger turned inwards. And so, again, the anger itself is a signal. It's saying, okay, like something is off here, and a complexity here is that sometimes anger is a sublimation of another feeling or what we call a secondary emotion. So a response to a primary emotion. So, a man oftentimes might feel depression or sadness, but because there's so much shame around that, he then turns it into anger. So you want to be able to check in and be like, okay, is my anger telling me the truth, or is my anger, is it a sublimation or a secondary emotion? Now, of course, that in itself takes emotional intelligence because you have to become aware of it and recognize I'm feeling anger. Is that anger telling me the truth? But, the point here is that the anger itself generally isn't the issue. It's the aggression. It's the violence. It's the breaking shit. It's, the revenge or whatever that a person feels that they need to do in response to the anger.
Yeah, big negative stuff.
Exactly. So the emotional intelligence piece is being able to like be aware of those emotions, to respond to them in a way where you actually feel like you're in control of it. You're aware of it. I mean, that's the intelligence piece, right? Oh, interesting. I'm experiencing anxiety right now. You know, is this something that I need to like find some certainty? You know, do I need to find some connection? Do I need to just kind of like ride it out and be compassionate to myself? Do I need, like, what do I need in this moment to either manage this anxiety or, you know, abate it or be with it until it passes, because all emotions pass naturally as well. And so there's that piece. And then empathy is a really big part of that. So, you know, emotional intelligence is so important. This is why it's gained so much credibility within the leadership.
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's like a movement now. It's like you can't really go to a business conference without somebody mentioning emotional intelligence as being part of the equation of, you know, hiring a person who's going to be very effective in whatever they do, right?
Right. And so that's, you know, because in the leadership space, it is really important to be an emotionally intelligent leader. I mean, if you're reactive and if you're not compassionate, if you're not understanding, like, people won't want to work for you. You'll create a culture of fear. You'll create a culture of perfectionism. You'll create a culture that's very stagnant, and you won't be able to work well with other people. And really, like, you know, unless you're a solopreneur and never want to hire anyone else, and even if you are and don't want to do that, you're probably going to interact with customers, right? So it's really important to be able to have a certain level of like empathy and attunement and compassion, and be able to read, you know, other people's. You don't have to be so like attuned or intuitive that you can actually like read other people's feelings per se, but you need to be able to know that, like, from what a person is describing, you can have a sense of empathy. Like, okay, I think I know what this feels like.
Right. And that's a good point right there. So if you look at it, it's sort of the way that I picture it in my mind, and I could be wrong, and you can correct me right now if I am. I'm looking at it like on a scale of emotional intelligence is like a narcissist and then a total empath on either ends of the scale. And so I recognize that there are some narcissists out there to get shit done. I mean, like, they get stuff done. And, you know, there's some pretty good examples right now where there, you know, are people who are not very empathetic that just get stuff done and don't have any concern for anybody else other than what their agenda is. And then there's people on the other end of the scale who just give empathy and feeling. And I don't know as if that's the most positive thing.
No.
Because they lose themselves in that giving space.
Of course. Well, and that's where, like, you know, again, emotional intelligence is more than just empathy, right? Like, empathy is huge and important, and like, but it's also being able to recognize, like, oh, interesting, I have a tendency to people please. I avoid confrontation. I want to be liked. You know, for me, love means helping people, or there's a certain level of like codependence, or my self-worth is dependent on someone else's, you know, progress, like that kind of thing. And so having the awareness and the emotional intelligence to recognize our own patterns, which, like, all of those, which I relate to, you know, and it sounds like you do too, then we can see where it's like, oh, interesting. I mean, speaking of like narcissists and dating, which I know you and I both have, you know, ample experience in, there's like an empath narcissist path, and it being able to recognize, like, oh, you know, my heart is bleeding and I want to help this person, or the things that this person is saying to me, like, it's so compelling. But then to be able to, so when I talk about reactions, I mean, yes, one reaction is something like being reactive to anger. And we think of that as like, okay, well, I can learn how to work with being reactive to anger or anxiety. But what we don't talk enough about is like being reactive to this, like being reactive to a sense of like empathy or urgency to help or wanting to respond. So again, I've had to really like struggle with this in my life, with relationships that ultimately, not just romantic ones, familial ones, that leave me feeling, you know, worse, because my awareness of a person's pain, my response is, oh my gosh, okay, forget my needs. Like, I want to help them. What can I do? Let me get in there. Let me try to rescue. I can't be with their discomfort. And so part of us as empaths is the emotional intelligence piece is recognizing I have to learn how to be with the discomfort of another person's discomfort, and trust that doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me selfish. It doesn't mean that, you know, that person's going to die, or if they do, you know, I cannot live my life being their rescuer, right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is boundaries. So there's like, if it's a scale and there's one end and the other end, it's sort of like, how do I kind of allow to be able to go to either side when I need to, but be within this space that's like good for me as a person.
Yeah. And, the tough thing or the frustrating thing for some people who want like really clear guidelines and everything in a box is like, it depends on the situation. It depends every single time. And so I always say, we got to do what serves us, and we do what serves us until it doesn't serve us anymore. And so in one situation, and this is where the emotional intelligence piece comes in, it's being able to be really aware and be like, okay, here's all the information that I have. I'm taking information from like, verbally, intuitively, somatically, like there's all these different ways that I'm gathering information. I'm looking at past experiences. I'm trusting, there's just all these sort of different ways in which we decide how to proceed. And so in a situation where we're thinking, okay, well, should I jump in and, rescue or do the thing that the really empathic part of me wants to do because I can't handle the pain of this person's pain or, what they're describing.
And that's it. That's it exactly. Because you're the empath, you put yourself directly in their shoes. Like you are them at that moment, feeling whatever it is, that pain that they have, right? So you feel it and you're like, oh shit, I can do something about this. I want to do something about this, but should you do something about this?
Yeah, so exactly.
Your point is getting back to that. You can feel their pain, but you don't have to like do anything about it.
Yeah. And there are various different like strategies. A really good book is called The Empath Survival Guide, for anyone for whom this resonates with, where it's just kind of like, okay, I need to be able to like kind of set a boundary. And oftentimes it is something like, visual or imagining yourself in this kind of like protective bubble, or sometimes it's taking distance from people, physically, emotionally. And just, again, constantly reminding yourself like, look, like it's funny, like I feel this really strongly. And actually like I did mushrooms recently and like it intensifies everything. Pardon?
You didn't call me?
Yeah, no, sorry, I had to call him again. I probably shouldn't be saying that as I'm worrying about.
I know. I had this. Well, you had Portobello. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But well, the Portobellos, they really made me like, as they do, they made me just like a lot more like open, right? And feeling things just like that much more strongly. And I'm a feeler as is. Like, I really take on people's pain, and it makes me a super good therapist, but it also, means that I have to kind of set boundaries myself. And, I was just like, during that day, I was just so aware of like the suffering of the world. Right. And just like, it's New York too, right? Everyone's suffering. Like, no, I'm just kidding. Everyone's suffering in some way in the world, but
there's just that many more people in that space is a little bit.
Yeah. And so I was just like so aware of it. So uncomfortable with like this powerlessness of not being able to help these people, complete strangers, and then also people I care about in my life who I know are suffering, and the pain of all of that. And it is incredibly painful. And it's also one of like these pains of life. And I think we feel it in many different ways. It's like, okay, well, there's like the problems of like our leadership in the world right now. I just listening to the Daily before you called, and like it's talking about like the new Brazilian leader who, is like the Trump of Brazil or whatever, right? Yeah. And so it's like we see these things happening, and like the plastic in the oceans, and like misogyny everywhere, and like, again, just like conflict everywhere. And can be so much pain on like, what can I do? I want to help. I want to like change the world. I want to make things better. And there's I think this balance, whether it's on like a global level or an individual level, where we have to just be with, okay, what's in my control, what is something that I can do, and then how do I also like protect myself and not lose myself or lose like the beauty of the world in like this kind of negativity or pain.
It goes back to where you started. It's suffering.
Totally.
Recognition. Life is suffering. It's
and not like allowing that to spiritually bypass as well, right? Because I think like with a lot of I think there is a balance between being like, well, it's, you can't do anything. All you can do is.
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah. Right? So it is that balance. Like, should I do something about it? Can I do something about it? Or on the other end, it's like, it just is what it is. I'm not going to do a damn thing. I'm just going to like, I don't know.
Exactly. I think there's a balance there. And I think, obviously it varies based on individual, and ignorance is bliss for some people. And I can't judge that mentality. But I think being able to even just be aware of that experience and how one's aversion to the emotions that something like this causes will allow you to be able to determine how you want to proceed or how you want to act or what impact you want to have, or if that impact is simply being aware of it and talking about it, with others.
Right. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of talking about stuff. Absolutely. Which is why I'm on a podcast with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think communicating and talking about all this stuff just brings it really present in the moment. And that's the opportunity to kind of have an awareness or create change is right here in the moment. So if we were to tie those two together, like resilience and emotional intelligence, is there a tie there? Is there any sort of overlap where, people who are resilient have gotten to this point where they have this capacity for emotional intelligence that's within the boundaries of like safe and good for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think like emotional intelligence is an avenue to resilience, or one of the factors in resilience. And so, I mean, I think like, yeah, they build on each other. I mean, I know for me, I think I would consider myself a fairly resilient person. And for me, part of that resilience is being able to like know in a challenging situation, like, I'll be able to get through this. I'll be able to, like, this will all make sense at some point, even if it doesn't right now. I don't have to find the meaning or the silver lining. And in fact, we don't always want to do that right away because it can be a form of spiritually bypassing and denying our experience. But, being able to recognize like, okay, well, down the road, this is going to make sense. I'm going to be able to see this. I can trust in myself and in my resilience, and I'll be able to see it in a certain way. And then also just being able to trust that, like, you have the skills. Like, emotional intelligence is really a skill or a set of skills to be able to make a person more resilient.
Okay, so how does somebody gather these skills? I mean, what do they do? Is it like reading the book? Is it being with a therapist? Is it, how does somebody fine tune their emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, I think like.
Obviously, we're not talking about pathology here, where there are, people who are suffering on both ends of the extreme who maybe can't get off of that for different reasons. But, by and large, what could somebody do if they were like, oh, you know what, I'd really like to, have a little more emotional intelligence and understand when I'm having these emotions, how to handle them better.
Yeah.
Because I get that all the time. I have a lot of friends and people in my life who said, oh, you know what, I really wish I could have handled that better. Or if I could recognize that I was going to get really emotional about this, that I had it would have been a different outcome if I could have said, oh, maybe I should just hold off for a little bit on react to that emotion.
Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that these friends of yours are aware, at least, that there's something they want to change, like, that's a great start. So the first step to change in anything is awareness, and recognizing that it's, something that's suboptimal, and there may be some room for growth there, as there's room for growth for all of us in every area. And then, the awareness piece. So look, like, for some of us, we process interpersonally, and others we process intrapersonally. So like, what is more of what's a safer place for you to process, or a more productive place for you to process? Is it with therapists, friends, other forms of healers, or is it, do you want to go to a more formal practice like a yoga or meditation or Tai Chi or Qigong or something like that? Right. Or, is it journaling? Is it going for a walk and just kind of reflecting? Basically just bringing attention to your inner experience. Again, like, emotionally, cognitively, somatically. So taking stock. I mean, this is kind of like the foundation of mindfulness, and the piece about mindfulness is just that, like, you want to do it without judgment, and it's very present focused, and it's not about like intellectualizing. It's not about, reacting or coming up with like solutions and stuff like that. It's just being aware, like, these are the thoughts I'm having. These are the feelings I'm having. These are the bodily sensations that are coming up.
Yeah. And so, it's not like a checklist of stuff that you do when you have it's going to be, if I do these 5 things, I'm going to be emotionally intelligent.
Right. So it's, starting off, I mean, it really is just this awareness piece and this mindfulness piece. And so if a person was wanting to develop their emotional intelligence, I mean, like, as I said, all those pieces around awareness and mindfulness, and then developing an emotional vocabulary is huge for people. So again, we grow up in a society, particularly men grow up not learning how to label their emotions. And so I remember I like dated this guy for a while who I would always ask him, like, how he was feeling. And he would, because, that's what happens when you date a therapist. But I'd be like, how are you feeling? And he'd either be like,
yeah. I've dated a few therapists, and it is like, when you start dating, you're like, is she going to analyze me right now? How am I going to react to this?
Yeah, no, I know. I tell people, my Hinge profile says I'm a writer. I don't tell people I'm a therapist until, like, I feel like I feel safe enough to share that with them. Anyway, so it, being able to be aware of that kind of stuff, and then also be able to label it, because as I said, yes, like, my story was basically that this guy would always just say good or bad. And like, those aren't feeling words, right? So being able to actually, like, we cannot be empathic if we don't know what feelings are, if we can't label our own feelings. So the way to learn how to be more empathic of other people is to be able to start to recognize these emotions within yourself. And look, I mean, there are some people who, because of their life circumstances, they are just going to be more like empathic and attuned. And I think like women overall tend to be more empathic, and that's a biological or like evolutionary thing. And that's impacted by our hormones, like certain times in my cycle, I'm like, oh my God, I feel everyone's everything. And I know exactly what that person's feeling. And it was only because I caught a glance of their face and and then other times like I'm less aware of that. So there is like a biological or hormonal component as well. But I really do believe that empathy is and compassion are what would, change the world. Like if we could all just understand and see each other as humans and recognize like the suffering people are going through and, have a little bit more kindness and patience and like all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's my idealistic part of me talking, but
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely couldn't agree with you more. I heard a quote the other day, and it was from Hindu scriptures. And the response was, I think God had asked this particular person, entity, who are you? And they said, if I don't know who I am, I serve you. If I know who I am you. And that, like, I heard that, I'm like, boom, immediately resonated. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's it right there for me. So it's that compassion and that empathy of being able to be the other person.
Yeah. So for a person who's looking for like that checklist, I would just say like awareness, getting your emotional vocabulary, honestly, just like Google feelings vocabulary or emotional vocabulary. I think there's a feelings wheel that comes up pretty easily. Study that, put it on your phone, try to do a check-in, maybe a meditation every day for a few minutes where you're just recognizing, okay, let me cross-reference what I'm experiencing with this list and decide which feeling it is or feelings are coming up for me. There's no right, there's no wrongs. It's all about just trying to like learn and understand. And that's where therapy can be helpful because, part of our job as therapists is empathizing. So if a person's like, telling a story, for us to be able to be like, oh, it sounds like you were feeling really wronged by this person, or like, oh, I can really just hear how overwhelmed you're feeling right now. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess I am feeling overwhelmed. Right. So it's part of
it seems like that's the key to creating that therapeutic relationship is like, realizing that person really cares about you. And then you can open up and really
totally. And part of that is helping a person like develop that vocabulary. So for my clients who have like what we call alexithymia, where we don't really have, where they're sort of like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know. I don't have a word for it. Part of our job is to help them come up with those words. Well, it seems like based on this, if I were in your shoes, I might be feeling like this and this. Does that seem like it could resonate? Oh yeah, actually, I think I am feeling that way. Right. So helping a person connect back to their body, because so many of us are very cerebral and taught to not feel anything and kind of like cut off right here. So yeah, I mean, those would be like the major first steps. I would say it's really just, it's awareness. It's like the language for it. And then it's practicing that, and that's kind of it. It's not really, it's not too complicated beyond that. The more just like awareness, that's kind of where mindfulness comes from. And then you're able to recognize like, ooh, I'm feeling really like X in this moment. Where do I go from here? As opposed to unconsciously reacting. People think that like by focusing on our emotions, we become more emotional, but it's the opposite. By ignoring our emotions or trying to suppress them, then we create what we call secondary emotions. As I mentioned earlier, it's like, if you're feeling sad or lonely or anxious or heartbroken or something, and your instinct is to be like, don't feel that, think positive, you have so much to be grateful for, then we not only are feeling that thing that we were already feeling, that like, it's not usually just going to disappear by telling yourself you're grateful. But then we also feel what we call the secondary emotions, which is this layer of shame on top of that, or anxiety on top of that. Like, I've got to get rid of this. I can't be anxious. If I'm anxious during this presentation, I'm going to fuck up. Of course, if you're anxious during the presentation, you're being evaluated. Anybody's anxious when they're being evaluated. So like,
it's a normal emotion. Yeah,
exactly. So just going into the emotion as opposed to trying to dismiss or avoid it.
Right. And you mentioned a couple of times, meditation or journaling or stuff like that. I'll share that, I have a daily meditation practice. It's not perfect. It is, when I was at a meditation retreat one time, and the instructor said, what's the best meditation that you can do? And everybody was like raising their hands and giving all these different, forms of meditation. She said, no, it's the one that you do. So whatever, so I sit every morning and I or try to sit every morning and I meditate. And that for me gives me that moment during the day to actually say, when I have when I have emotions come up, it gives me that moment of lucidity to say, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to react to that. Let me think about this for a minute. I'm feeling this way. So it gives me the opportunity. My partner, Tammy, does meditative journaling. So she'll sit in the morning and do a half hour, an hour of meditative journaling. And for her, that's that process of becoming mindful and aware. Yeah. So there are tools out there that you really can use with some huge, in my experience, huge benefit.
Totally. And part of that is really just learning how to be with our discomfort, right? Like a lot of people think that meditation is about clearing your mind, or it's supposed to be relaxing. I'm like, no, I fucking hate meditation. No, I'm just kidding. I've done
listen, I'll tell you, meditation's different every friggin' day. I mean, some days I'll sit there and my mind will race and I'll be there for half an hour and like not ever bring my thoughts back. Right. And it'll be like, right. And other days I'll sit and it'll be like, boom, I'm just there and it's perfect and it's sublime and it's amazing.
Well, and again, it's like, meditation, it's like, there's so many different forms, as you mentioned. I mean, it's like saying, do you like exercise or not? Like, it's like, well, what type? Like, or like, there's many different sports. There's this, there's that, there's dance, there's like yoga. And so like, if you might be doing something that's more of like a focused meditation where you're focusing on your breath and you're trying not to necessarily have thoughts, or you're trying to come back to like, whatever that anchor is, it's very different from like some form of open space meditation where, you're just observing thoughts and you're actually kind of bringing attention to them, but you're not attaching to them and you're kind of just taking it on.
Letting it flow. Like it's just a free flow. That's all.
Right. So it can be very different, and sometimes it's pleasant and sometimes it's not. And, part of the goal of meditation is to learn how to like not scratch the itch. Right. So like when you think about a seated meditation,
I love that.
Right. So like, we, I mean, I've done Vipassana, I've done many different, forms of meditation and retreats and all the rest. And like, part of it is, okay, I'm sitting here very uncomfortably and I want to itch my nose and it's really fucking itchy, but like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to try to wait as long as I can, or I'm going to like wait and, see if that sensation passes. And look, sometimes it does. And sometimes, you really have to scratch it, but like you try to wait as long as possible before you scratch it. And it's the same thing with like reacting to our emotions. So like, okay, I'm going to notice these feelings. And by waiting to react, I can choose how to respond in a healthy way. And sometimes we do need to distract. Sometimes we do, I'm like so happy that Spotify has just partnered with Hulu, because I never had like Netflix or anything like that. And the only show I've ever really gotten into was This Is Us. And I started watching like a few episodes of it. And then I like whatever free subscription I had ended. And I was like, I forgot about it. But anyway, this just happened like a few days ago. I got my notification, my Spotify, that's like, you now get free Hulu. And I was like, I can get back into This Is Us. And it's like so great because, like, as I mentioned, before we got on the call, there's like a lot of shit happening in my life right now. And I'm like, it's been great because I'm like, I'm being tested and all the things that I teach people are working. But like one of them is like, okay, sometimes it's like, I'm going to go for a walk on the West Side Highway and I'm going to, listen to some piano, because I know when I listen to acoustic covers, I just focus on the words and I don't actually focus on my feelings. So I'm going to listen to piano and I'm going to actually like notice what's going on. I'm going to process, I'm going to cry, I'm going to do some of this stuff. And other times I'm like, I'm going to watch 4 episodes of This Is Us. And I'm just like, not going to like, I mean, I definitely feel, because it's like such a tearjerker show, but I'm not going to focus on my own stuff. And that's okay. Right. So, we look at like coping can just be replaced with like distracting sometimes. And it's all about just finding like, what is our healthy coping mechanisms? What do we need in this moment? Where can we try to be with our discomfort a little bit more, or learn or grow in some way? And then where can we be really self-compassionate, which sometimes is looking at the emotions, and other times is having like the pint of ice cream or the This Is Us marathon, or
it's good. It's good. It's a positive thing. Yeah, being with the discomfort. My new way of rating whether a movie is good or bad in the last month is how long I cried after or during the movie, right? So, A Star Is Born, that's a 45-minute real jag at the end. I rewatched Jerry Maguire. Oh yeah, you had me at hello. Okay, that's like a 30-minute jag. I'm totally out. Yeah. The best one is I was on a plane going to California like a month ago, and I watched Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm in the middle seat while 2 people are looking at me like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy?
But
I missed Freddie Mercury. I missed Freddie.
we climb on planes. Like there's something with the altitude or something like that. But like apparently they
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
No, truly. Well, I'm sure there's I'm sure it's.
No, I was okay with that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been really, really great. At the end of the podcast, I always like to have deep questions with nurseMARK. So I'm gonna rattle off some questions, and I'd love to hear your perspective, your answer, your worldview on this. All right?
Cool.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. If you could invite anyone to dinner, who would it be? And that can be living or dead. Anybody at all.
I have trouble with this question. It's like weird. Like I don't really have anyone. I mean, I think my instinct, honestly, is Trump. Like I would like to have dinner with Trump. I'd like to just like really try to understand him, but I don't think he would let me in. So like it's like, can I revise that for like if I could have anyone as a client? Like,
okay,
you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and again, like I've dated enough narcissists at this point to know, like, you know, they're not gonna like, yeah, you're not gonna understand.
Trust me, so will I. It's the way of life. It's how we roll.
Exactly. But that's my answer.
Yeah, we're like prize fighters who just have to get in the ring one more time and win that fight.
Exactly. Yeah. We're like, but they're gonna get it. They're gonna.
But I'm gonna make it this time, Coach. I'm gonna make it.
Probably not.
Oh no, probably not, Megan. Probably not. What's your favorite quote?
Probably the one in my email signature, which I'm sure you've read because, or maybe not, I don't know, but it's Pema Chodron. And let me see if I can remember it by heart here. If not, I will just look at my email. But it's, we think the point is to pass the test or wait, no, you know what? I'm going to read it because I'm going to butcher it. And then I feel like I would be doing
a disservice
to Pema. Exactly.
You can, we have technology here. We're about technology these days in dating and in podcasts.
We think the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes for letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. And that's Pema Chodron. And so that's really that was from her book, When Things Fall Apart, which was absolutely life-changing for me. Yeah. I recommend it for everybody. And it's just this kind of like, life isn't about like arrival, it's arrival and every moment is an opportunity for arrival. And, all the messiness is part of the beauty as well,
It is. That's a great quote. What is your most treasured memory?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I've got to revise. I think I'll probably revise this as a treasured memory because
a
lot of pressure. I'm like, what's my?
That's fine.
And then it's concerning.
You can revise the questions, by the way.
I'm revising all of them. I'm like, the client I'd like to have the most. I think, gosh. I don't know. Let me think. I mean, it would definitely be something. I'm very lucky. Like I have an incredibly close group of girlfriends whom I've known since two of them since I was 3, another couple since elementary school.
Those lifelong friendships. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We're a very close group of 6 and we've traveled a lot together and it would probably be something from there. I mean, I'm hesitant to admit this, but I'm like, it would probably be Vegas with them. Honestly, we've been everywhere. We've been Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Bali, but I think there's something about just being with my best girlfriends, either Vegas or Whistler. Those are places we go a lot. And just I don't know, I guess just embracing, our time together. I think it's such a opportunity for me to be mindful because it just feels so rich. And then I love dancing so much. So we go dancing a lot and
love it.
Love treasure memory.
That's your group that keeps you resilient. That's your
totally.
Social
connection. Oh my gosh. I've said to them so many times, if it weren't for that group, I would be off the deep end. I would have never, I would not be the human that I am. I would not.
Same, my friend. Yeah. Amazing. That's so cool. All right. This is a deep one. If you found out you were going to die in the next year, what would you change about the way you're living today?
That's so funny. Someone just asked this yesterday. I mean, not to me. They asked for a group and I didn't think about it. So, it's weird. I don't think I would change that much. I guess I would, for me, my life is about impact, and that's, I think I have a lot of death anxiety, and that's how I manage my death anxiety is like, okay, I want to try to have as much impact as possible. And maybe that's like a way of feeling like relevant and having a sense of legacy. And also for me, I think like the thought of death, the hardest part for me is like the sense of aloneness, even though that doesn't really make a lot of sense because I know I probably wouldn't be feeling. So I think for me, like I honestly wouldn't change too much. I'd probably see less clients. I'd still want to be, writing a book that I could get out, before I died. Yeah. And then I would just want to spend as much time as possible with those girlfriends. I just like, I don't have a partner, I would just want to have like a lot of really close time with them. And then I'd want to just have as much impact. And I'd probably do more, like talks. Like I'd probably be like, okay, I'm going to die. Let me download all this information. I want to have as much impact as possible. Yeah. And I wouldn't care as much about
All right. I'm a huge fan of being very acutely aware that we have no guarantees and that death is going to come when it comes. And so, it's huge for me too, to feel like, oh, I don't think I'd change anything because I'm living into that right now. Like like, that's it. Yeah. So Megan, you should talk more.
I know I should. I know. Well, unfortunately I still have to have enough capital to survive, but I guess I could talk more and be charging more talks and
yes. That's the key right there. Yes. That's what we call pricing. All right. What is the greatest accomplishment of your life to date? Because I know there's so much more coming in the future of today. Like it could be today.
So again, this is a tough one for me with my like deterministic worldview. And also like, I'm super aware of privilege. Like I think that I'm only where I am because of the privilege that I'm white, able-bodied, cisgender, heterosexual, like thin, like educated, safe country, like all that kind of stuff. So I've had these, so many privileges that other people haven't had, that have gotten me here that are no product whatsoever of like hard work or, anything that I've done to deserve certain accomplishments. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think, I would think for me personally, maybe there's two. One would be, I'm revising the question, my two greatest accomplishments. One thing would be truly like learning how to love myself. I used to be like a very self-loathing person and dealt very extremely with like, anxiety and depression and eating disorders. And I think like the recovery from all of that, not to say that I don't still go into periods, where I feel quite depressed or, have nights that keep me up until 7 a.m. with anxiety and whatnot. But yeah, exactly. But, I would say I'm recovered from the eating disorders that plagued me for most of my life. And I remember actually doing a Vipassana, like in 2013, and I did it 2 years after the heartbreak of 2011. And I waited that long because I was like, I want to make sure that I don't trust I can be with myself with my pain. And I remember a couple of days into that Vipassana, which was like excruciatingly challenging. I remember being like, I like myself. This is like so cool. This is the first time that I really saw like, I like myself. I think I'm funny. I enjoy my own company. Yeah. And that was super powerful for me. So I'd say that was one, is like really learning how to love myself. And then the other one, like moving to New York. I mean, I look back on that now and I'm like, that was fucking crazy. Like, what was I thinking? I left this like amazing job in Vancouver and like all of this comfort and relationship and friendships and nature and Whistler, and I moved to New York like and it's just something now I look at, I'm like, I don't think I would ever have the balls to like, what's the ovaries, I don't know what's the woman version of that, to be able to do something like that again. But then I'm like, no, I would, like, I'll be right now I'm dealing with this immigration stuff and I'm like, maybe I'll go to Toronto, like why not have a new adventure, right? And so I'm proud of myself for, maybe accomplishment isn't the right word, but I'm proud of myself for the courage that I think I have, in many different areas. And so I guess cultivating courage would be my greatest accomplishment today.
That is amazing. And and it really resonates with me. We actually do have a lot in common when it comes to that, background of not self-love and getting to a place of definite self-love. And the last question is, this is my favorite question. I just added this today. What do you like best about me, Megan?
Oh my
It is truly
gosh.
my favorite question because I love to talk about me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I love everything about you, Mark. I mean, I think
the question.
I think no. I think this one I won't have to revise. I mean, I think I just love how easy just to connect to you, Mark. You know, I mean, you are very authentic, and I appreciate that so much in people. It's rare. Like, you don't meet a lot of people that you just feel totally safe and not judged by, and you know, you create a really safe space, like as a friend and as a podcast host, and you know, and I think that's a testament to your probably emotional intelligence and compassion and all of those sorts of things and self-awareness. And so, yeah, I think if more people were that way in the world, then again, we'd be able to solve shit. You know, we'd all have so much more like building compassion.
That was my most treasured moment today. And you know, thank you so much. And I did it as a joke, but you know what? That really means to hear that from you, because you know, you're a good friend and someone who I really, you know, value you and what you do, and your messaging out there. It is amazing that you share all of the trials and tribulations that you've been through, and that's very rare for somebody, especially somebody who's in the therapy business. You know, it's almost as if you have to create this persona where you've had nothing ever go wrong in your life and you're perfect. So I'm going to now transfer that to you, my client.
Yeah.
More like, I guess it's more attraction versus promotion. You're saying, hey, I've lived it. I've done it. Come on in. I can help you. I can tell you.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm still learning. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of this constant. I mean, my focus is sort of the study of it all. I feel like I study myself when I study humans, and I try to share information, you know, that's helpful.
Life.
Yeah.
In this crazy biological, electrical, chemical thing that we live in. And it is amazing. And so I want to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to, you know, be with me today on the podcast. And so if people want to get a hold of you, we're going to have on the show notes, obviously, we're going to have all of your contact information. But if you want to real quick, just tell people how they can get a hold of you, connect with you, follow you wherever, you know, you think is best. Lay it on me. What do you got?
Yeah. So Instagram is kind of like where I'd say I do put the most content out there. So you can follow me on Instagram at Megan J. Bruneau. It's MEGAN JBRUNEAU. Facebook, I've got a Facebook page and I share my articles and Instagram content and stuff on there. My website is meganbruneau.com, MEGANBRUNEAU.com. You can email me, Megan at meganbruneau.com. My caveat is I try to respond to as many emails as possible. I can't always get to them all. But, you know, reach out, I'll try, follow up. I mean, I guess I'm on Twitter too. I have a YouTube channel that's like basically dead. Just like,
they come and they go. It's social media, you know, one's hot, one's not.
Right.
So.
Oh, YouTube's still very hot. I'm like, you know, I want to live my life and I don't want to, you know, just do everything. So yes, but really like Instagram and my website are probably the best choices.
Great. Megan Bruneau, thank you so much for being a guest on the nurseMARK podcast. That's it. We're wrapping up. We'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Mark.